Hey everyone, good morning. Hope you're having a great Friday. Welcome to today's webinar. We are talking to Justin Key. Justin and I connected a couple of times before this trying to figure out a topic, and we couldn't really come up with one, honestly, but I really wanted Justin to just tell his story. Justin has a great story, great background, so that's what we want to talk about today. So Justin, I'm gonna hand it over to you. Tell us about you, where you come from, and how you got to where you are today.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me on. My name's Justin Key. I grew up in a military family. I've lived all over the country, so I don't necessarily have a home, but my favorite place to live by far was Hawaii. And right now, I'm a real estate investor, an entrepreneur, and co-founder of Grayline Investments. And yeah, I actually have a pretty interesting backstory how I got to this point. Do you want me to go over that?
I want you to tell us everything.
All right. So I actually come from a long line of real estate investors. My grandfather was a syndicator and a builder. Interestingly enough, I grew up hearing a lot of his stories of him becoming a millionaire about 8 times over and becoming bankrupt 8 times over. Um, and then my dad took up the same thing. He owned a bunch of rentals throughout his lifetime. Um, and I grew up hearing some of his horror stories with some really bad tenants. He lived in a small town in southern Indiana, and he had a tenant that was basically doing some illegal activities in his property. And the guy was threatening him with guns, and it was just a very crazy situation. So those were kind of my first two introductions to real estate investment. I knew that everyone in my family had been involved at some point, but they kind of had some horror stories that they shared with me over the years. And then my parents, I went to high school in New Orleans, and we had a house there during Katrina, and we lost everything. We got about 5 feet of water in our house, and we lost everything. So, I think I spent a lot of time kind of turned off by real estate and very scared of it. I didn't understand it. And up to, maybe 5, 6 years ago, I thought that it was just something very risky. But eventually I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad maybe 5, 6 years ago, and it really opened my eyes to the power of real estate investing, especially for your long-term wealth. And it just really convinced me that, all right, I need to give this a second look. I need to not be so turned off by my family's experience. And yeah, the rest is history. I just started talking to people and dipping my feet in. It actually took me about 5 years of reading, researching, going to meetups, continuously saying that I'm new to investing and all that before I actually dove in and bought my first property.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can relate. I probably looked hard for 2 years, like exclusively had no job, wanted to get into it, and looked for 2 years before I pulled the trigger. And like you, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and was totally convinced, totally changed my definition of what an asset is. I defined asset a little differently before reading that book. But I loved it. And I love your story. I didn't know about the Katrina stuff. And just to give everyone some context listening, Justin and I met when we were 18, I guess, our freshman year at West Point. And, we've known each other ever since. And so I knew a little bit of your story. I also didn't know that you came from a long line of investors. When you first started talking, my thought was, that's kind of cool. Like I had the opposite experience where nobody that I knew was doing it. And everyone was trying to talk me out of it, saying it was too risky and it was just a lot to take on. And I, for whatever reason, like believed them, let them talk me out of it, even though they've not had any experience in the industry. So you have a very different experience. So what do you think changed? Like, how did you go from hearing these stories and growing up with these stories, and then suddenly you're willing to invest? Like, what changed in your mind?
I think a big thing for me was just learning and understanding real estate investment a little bit better. So, you know, after I spent some time reading and listening to podcasts, then I had the knowledge to be able to go back and look at what my grandfather had did, kind of my dad's strategy, and critique him a little bit. And not to get too much into like personal family history, but um, some of the challenges my grandfather had were they were derived from his character, basically, right? You know, so I could kind of realize that that was the cause of those. And then with my dad, he was investing in a really really poor, economically depressed town in Indiana, with you know the same quality of houses and tenants. So I think just having a better understanding of real estate and then being able to apply what I learned to their situations kind of got me over the hump and made me realize that I'm not destined for the same fate as them and that I can do it better.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that a lot of people that come from families, like entrepreneurial families, probably feel the same way. And I think some of it is culture. Like our culture has shifted so significantly. And I think entrepreneurship is like cool now, right? It's a fad. I don't necessarily think that was the case when our parents were our age or our grandparents were our age. And I think leadership is so different. I think about my grandma and grandpa owned a business together, and I'm pretty sure that my grandma ran the business, but she was just always just the secretary. And I think she had
Hmm.
to like undo everything that my grandpa did. In a lot of cases, character kind of related things and just overreaction to things. And my dad kind of did a lot of the same stuff. They both had steel erection companies, and I just watched them go like up and down, like the constant cycle, which part of that is just, you know, being a business owner. But I think a lot of it was self imposed, and I watched them kind of deal with some craziness, and I was like, you're not doing it right. Like it's easy
Yeah.
for you to say that from the outside, but when you see just like that they don't have the right systems in place, or they're not treating their employees well, you're like, man, you could fix these things so easily and so quickly. And I think that's part of what drew me to wanting to be a business owner. So probably like you, like I saw them not do it well, I knew I could probably do it better, and so it
Mhm.
gave me faith to kind of go the same route.
Well, and what's awesome now is with technology and how interconnected we are, and how easy it is to just reach out to someone. It's just never been easier to improve yourself and get better. Um, and you have to take advantage of that. And you see that in like so many different aspects. I'm a big basketball fan, and the skill level in basketball has exponentially grown over the last, like, say 10 years. And I think you can directly attribute that to the popularity of YouTube. Now you can go on YouTube and get all of these free drills and lessons and techniques and strategies for the game, which you couldn't do a long time. And the people that started taking advantage of those, 5, 10 years ago, they're in the NBA now.
Yeah, I think you can say that about like every sport, at most things that have any type of a strategy. Like you can kind of constantly think of ways to improve it. I was actually just thinking about that in terms of baseball. I was doing a workout yesterday, right at this baseball field, and I was running sprints. And I was thinking, wow, the bases are so close together. Like you don't have to run very far to get from first to second
Hmm.
base. And I was like, when baseball first like became a sport, or even a hobby, like I was like, maybe that seemed like a far distance. And I was like, I wonder if they'll ever consider like extending the distance, or even from like the mound to home plate. But I think like even as the pitchers get better, so do the batters, and as the runners get faster, so do the players, right? They're able to throw the ball quicker. And so I agree, like you're constantly improving and constantly having to also like strategize at the same time. And I think you can relate that to sports, even hobbies, and also obviously entrepreneurship too.
Yeah, it's definitely true with real estate. It's definitely true with owning and running a business. There's basically unlimited resources out now to improve yourself and to learn. And I think the mindset has to be you've never arrived, you're never good enough. And with that comes the flip side of like, you can have those negative thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I'm not there yet. um, but I think the mission, Jordan Peterson said it best. He's a big speaker and psychotherapist, and really his mission in the world is to teach people that you are never good enough, and that what you should be measuring yourself against is not other people but who you were yesterday, and just trying to get a little bit better each day. And it's never been easier to do that.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a really good point. And I think, something we focus on obviously is like celebrating our wins. And so you have to have like a balance of that, like celebrating your successes and your wins and realizing how far you've come, but also realize like not only are you not there wherever there is, like you're also never going to actually get there. And what one of our partners says all the time, Plum always says, if we lose sight of this, whatever this is, it'll be like the first day we start to go out of business. And so you kind of have to think of it that way. And that's why so many businesses fail. It's something like 90% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. And that's crazy. But I also think that the majority of those businesses, I think they quit. I think that people just don't want to wrap their head around like that. You're never going to get there. This is never going to get easier. You constantly have to just get better and keep up with the competition or ahead of the competition. And I think that takes a certain personality more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really really hard. We took Gray Line Investments from zero to a six-figure business in about 4 months, and it was really really hard, and it hasn't really gotten easier. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, partially because we continue to aim higher and we want to do more. um, but you definitely have to have a lot of grit and be in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
You mentioned celebrating your wins. Something I really struggle with, like appreciating the fact that I accomplished something, even if it's a small goal, and kind of celebrating that. Do you have kind of daily habits, or how do you make sure that you're celebrating wins?
First of all, I'm supposed to be asking you the questions.
Okay. So
No,
this is a
I'm just
conversation.
kidding. I'm just kidding. So I'm not very good at it, honestly. I have to literally like schedule this stuff. And sometimes I lose sight of things, but my husband's actually the one who will like remind me, or like sometimes we'll put the kids to bed and he'll like open a bottle of wine and he'll pour a glass and he'll cheers. Like he'll be like, "Hey, this happened this week." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that." Cause I just moved on to the next thing. So he's really good about like making me do that stuff and like, kind of cheering me on. But I do find that like if I have a closing on a Monday and I know it's going to be a crazy week, I will like literally put in my calendar, like we're going to celebrate on Friday, and even if it's just like we're going to order food and whatever, like something I think is so important to just like sit back and sit in that moment for a minute, because otherwise, like you've been talking about, you just realize like it can almost become like insurmountable. It's just like the pressure is just piling up on you. And I think if you are able to like relieve that pressure every once in a while and realize like you are making progress, that's a huge, huge part of it.
Yeah, I love that. I really like the idea of scheduling time each week to celebrate those wins. At Gray Line, we definitely do that every week. On Friday, we have a little happy hour, and we spend most of the time just going around, everyone that works in the company and talking about things they accomplished that week and wins. And it's just a great way to cap off the week.
Yeah, I agree. So let's go back to something else that you said. You talked about Gray Line's revenue and six figures. Like, first of all, that's completely unreal. Like, that's most businesses don't achieve that type of success ever, and certainly not within their first couple of months. And so, what I love about Gray Line's model is like the willingness to invest. And I think that that's a huge part of why, we've seen this growth, because we and you specifically, when you first started, didn't really have this plan to like slowly scale it. You guys were like, we are going all in, we're throwing everything at it, we're going to hire, we're going to pay for this, we're going to invest in this, we're going to invest in our education. And I think that's a huge part of why you've had success so quickly. And when I first started my business, I was not like that at all. I was the total opposite. I was like I'm not going to invest anything I don't have. I'm not going to commit anything I don't have. And my growth was like nothing for a long time. I mean, I was making like a couple $100 a month in the beginning. So can you tell us a little bit about like that decision and how you were able to commit like the investment into the business and how that helped scale to where it is now?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it was when we first started, we had three people that started the company, and we're all West Point grads. We're all, really hard workers, determined people that want to set high goals and achieve them. So I think that's a little bit different than just typically, we have like solo entrepreneurs who are trying to do this all on them by themselves. And because it was all three of us, we could really put a lot more work towards the business from different angles, and so that really helped a lot. Just to provide a little bit more context, at the time when we started, we all had full-time jobs that were paying us and supporting, our lives and our families. So that really allowed us to not worry about making money in the short term personally. And um, because we kind of had that advantage or that safety net, we were determined from the beginning. We knew that we needed it to be a big company and that we wanted to achieve some big things. And so we made the decision very early on that pretty much any of the money that we make, we're going to put back in the company. Since then, I think we've only paid ourselves like once. Um, but it's fine because we know the value of what we're building, and we have a very long-term view of what we're doing.
Yeah. So I've actually read a couple things about that. Couple like conflicting ideas about paying yourselves, right? Like some people say you've got to pay yourself, like otherwise what's keeping you motivated? And then other people say you should keep investing in the company. And if you don't have to pay yourself, leave the money in the company. Where do you stand in that thinking?
I think you have to pay yourself and you have to invest in the company. So our our um our first time that we paid ourselves, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was just like we've been working our butts off, grinding nonstop for 3 months, and we have to reward ourselves a little bit. And it definitely felt good to just see that we actually were paid from all the work we were putting in. But at the same time, right now we're sacrificing a lot of profits because we're just investing the revenue back into the business. And you know, I don't think it takes as long, and maybe it's just our business model, but it might not take as long as people think to have that exponential growth after you reinvest in your business. So, for instance, we just spent a lot of money turning on Google AdWords for finding seller leads. And I mean, it's a lot of money. And we had to commit for, I believe it was like 3 months of paying it um, with the company that we're using. But I have a feeling that next month, we're going to have a few leads that are going to pay for that cost immediately. And so I think you have to have the mindset that you want to keep reinvesting in your business if you want to scale quickly, but don't forget to pay yourself a little bit here and there.
Yeah, I love that. I think I'm somewhere along those lines too. Um, so I want to talk a little bit about partners, right? So so for everyone listening, I'm now a partner. So Justin and I are two of the four partners at Grayline. And when I first got started, I had a lot of people say like, "Oh man, having partners is hard," because I went from being a solopreneur to now being one of four. And in the beginning, it was awesome, and it still is awesome because I think we're pretty like-minded, all four of us. Like we have similar backgrounds. We all went to West Point. Like we're all Type A driven people. And but I've heard so many situations where like having partners is so hard, and you can have like so many issues with partners and things like that. Did that ever scare you when you first got started?
If I'm being totally honest, it still scares me. It's an interesting dynamic, especially having four of us, um, because all of us want to win and all of us want to carry our own weight. And so Just to give some context, right now I'm not very involved in our wholesaling business. Primarily, you and Plum are running that. Frank is, the CEO, and I'm kind of leading some marketing efforts and some education efforts, and trying to start some new revenue streams for us. So it's definitely a challenge because you want to carry your own weight. You want to make sure that you're contributing to the team. But it's almost, from what I'm doing now, it's like starting back at day one from 6 months ago when we were first starting our wholesaling business. So I think the main things with partners is having is just trust, actually. Um, I definitely trust that you guys, are working as hard as me, and hopefully that's vice versa. I never really have to. We have our weekly finance meetings, but I'm never checking the bank account to see, to make sure that everyone's being paid the same or whatever. Like, we just have a lot of trust in our group, and I think that's going to carry us very far.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I agree. And I mean, if you think about just our situation, 4 partners, like it's unreasonable to think that we would ever be contributing the same amount, right? We're not all ever going to be contributing 25%. Like some of us sometimes might be doing 90%, and other times we might be doing 2%. Like that's life, that's business, that's everything. And I think that knowing that the other person, is as committed to you, or other people are as committed to you, that's half the battle. And I think having the tough conversations, I think I've been the one kind of pushing us in this direction. And I just know that when things get bad with people, like things can go from being great to being really bad very quickly, and it gets emotional. And when it's bad, it's bad. And so I think you've got to have kind of conversations up front about how you deal with that stuff. How do you deal with someone who disagrees? And I think you systematize that part of it just like you systematize everything else, but it's like way harder to do. And you can talk about it, you can theorize on it, but it's like way harder to do in actual practice. So that's probably what happens with partners, I would think. Like it just ultimately comes down to communication and not understanding where the other person is coming from. And yeah, I agree though. I worry about it in terms of like everybody, the 4 of us we're great people. Like I don't ever want us to get to a point where like we lose sight of that, you know?
Yeah, I think you almost have to think of it, and I've never been married, so I'm speaking from a huge lack of experience, but you can probably speak to this better than me. But in my mind, it's like this weird marriage between 4 of us, you know? I mean, we spend a ton of time working and trying to build this thing together, and I mean, it's no different from a relationship with someone, like a intimate relationship with someone. If you let things build up and fester, eventually it breeds resent, and then the problem's much bigger than it initially was. So yeah, having that open communication and trust is key.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I could definitely see that. And so we're probably still in like the honeymoon phase, or like the what is it, like storming, no, norming, forming, norming, storming. I don't know if we've hit the storming phase yet, or the the post honeymoon phase. But
It's
I
coming.
think, yeah, exactly. It is for sure. And I think if we all acknowledge that and like have a plan for how we deal with that, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Okay, what else? What else should we talk about? Anything else you want to tell us about where you are, or
Well, yeah, so right now, my big focus is taking all the lessons that we've learned from building this 6-figure wholesaling machine very quickly, and helping other investors um, kind of do the same, not necessarily build a wholesale business, but really I want to give people the tools that people that are on the fence. Like I said, I spent 5 years before I did my first deal. You spent a few years doing the same. I think that's a very common thing. You've been a coach for a while. I know you've talked to a lot of people who have a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement, but they never actually do anything. So my mission is now becoming, I want to help people that are on the fence, that are considering real estate as a wealth building tool, to actually take action and do something. So with that in mind, I've been focusing a lot more on education. Grayline is actually launching a mastermind on August 19th. Go ahead and go to www.gray, Gray line.com or graylineacademy.com/mastermind. And you can go ahead and check out some information on that, apply for the group. But that's really becoming my mission, is just educating people and giving them the tools and onus to actually start taking action.
I love that. And I'm gonna put the that link in the show notes too. My first mastermind took me from like being this I had this idea of like I'm a stay-at-home mom who sort of dabbles in real estate on the side. And when I was in my first mastermind group, I bought a 10-unit apartment complex. Like within this was like 9 months into investing, right? I went from like for 2 years, did nothing, finally bought my first home, then did a flip, then bought a duplex, and then um, got into this mastermind, found this 10 unit, and I was like, yeah, I'm not ready for this. I was really intrigued by it, but I didn't even consider making an offer. And everyone was like, put in an offer. Like, see, worst you can get is no. And my offer was accepted. And then I was like, well, what do I do now? I don't know what the first thing about a commercial deal. And we like just figured it out together, and that has been like the coolest thing I've ever bought. It was like a value add opportunity, so we're constantly working on it. But it's just been so cool, and I don't think I ever would have done that probably for years if I hadn't been in that mastermind. So I'm a big believer in masterminds. Like surrounding yourself with the right people is what's going to take you to the next level, and then you're going to encourage other people and they're going to take it up a notch, and you're going to kind of feed off of each other, and everyone's going to make lots of money and do a lot of really cool things. So I'm a big fan of the mastermind concept.
Yeah, I was in your mastermind last year, and my favorite thing about it was having that weekly meeting with a small group of people and talking about what you're doing every week really holds you accountable to actually take action and make some progress. And um, that was like the big value add from that mastermind in my mind, and that's what I want to do for other people.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, if you get off that mastermind call and you tell them you're going to do this by the time you meet next, like you're not only letting yourself down when you don't do that, but you're letting the rest of them down. And that's so powerful, that accountability.
Yeah, and the other thing is, when we would face obstacles or we had different challenges, is that there's a group of people that you talk to every week that are very, very willing to help and give advice. And we solved a lot of problems and figured out how to get past a lot of challenges just from being in that group and being able to talk through them with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about that. Like even if you have four other people in the group and everyone's only been doing it for a year and you're just getting started, you have 4 years of experience right there, and you're all probably dealing with similar things. So you can learn from those other people exponentially quicker than if you had to just go out there and figure it out yourself. And that's not only going to cost you time, but cost you money as well, right? So I think you can definitely like scale much quicker, and just leverage their knowledge as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited for that. It's going to be great. All right. So last question. Any advice for new investors?
Yeah, so I think right now, if I were someone that was kind of sitting on the fence, I wanted to get started. I've read a few books. I've listened to all the Bigger Pockets podcasts, which it seems like every investor ever has done right now. Um, I would probably be a little hesitant because of everything that's going on with COVID-19. The economy has been up and down. Obviously, it's an election year too, so I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that might stop people from actually taking action and doing their first deal. And you know, I would really try to convince someone, if I were talking to a new investor, that that's not the right mindset to have. So anytime there's uncertainty in the marketplace, which there always is, but as that goes up, you just have to think of it as risk, and you just have to mitigate that risk. So right now, if I was a new investor and I still wanted to do a first deal, I would just be very picky about what that first deal was and make sure it wasn't very risky. So, for instance, we just sold a property in Killeen, Texas, which is outside of Fort Hood, which is the biggest U.S. military installation in the world. And we sold a property that had a $200,000 ARV, and we sold it at, I believe, 140. Yeah, I think it was 140. And this place was completely turnkey. You could buy it today cash and turn around the next day and list it on the MLS and get it sold very quickly. And because it was a newer house, it needed zero rehab, and it was bought way below its ARV. So you're buying into the equity. Like, to me, that's a very low risk deal. It actually had a tenant in place. So even if you decided not to sell it for a few months or while it was sitting on the market, like, you're still cash flowing, making money on that deal. So that kind of property in my mind would be something that an example of a very low risk deal that, someone might want to do right now.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, just being conservative and leveraging or yeah, I guess making sure that you're not taking up too much risk is always, always the strategy, I think, but especially when we're in a recession and especially when things are so uncertain because the market's always uncertain, right? But there's probably been very few times in history that it's been this uncertain, which
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to buy like a full gut on a really old house right now. That would be terrifying to me.
yeah, terrifying. I mean, that's terrifying under great circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Justin, how can listeners get in touch with you?
So if you want to reach out to me, search Justin Key on Facebook. But even better is go to Gray Line Investments on Facebook. Join our group there. Feel free to message us. We also have an educational page, so go to Gray Line Academy on Facebook for that. On Instagram, we're at Gray Line Investments. And yeah, feel free to reach out to us on any of those platforms, and we'll get in touch with you ASAP.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Justin. This was really, really insightful. Loved hearing your story. So thank you for sharing. And I hope that everyone reaches out to Justin and even gets on the cash buyers list.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Aaron, and you have a good day.
All right, you too. Thank you.